Looks like the circus is in town.
Tony Zuko, within the 2004 The Batman universe, started out as a knife-throwing circus performer along with his father, until one night, while performing, Tony misses and hits his father with the knife, putting an end to not only his father's life, but also to Tony's life as a regular citizen. Tony and the rest of his brothers ended up becoming a mob of sorts, and they would run a protection racket on any circus that would come into town. Tony would not only be the leader of the group, but he would also be the sadistic and heartless one of the group. However, the other brothers are still no saints by any means. The reason why Tony is the leader is because he's the most evil and the most willing to do whatever it takes in order to obtain whatever it is that he desires. And the things he desires most is violence and money. We see just how evil Tony can be whenever the Flying Graysons come into town. Upon the Graysons' arrival, Tony greets them with a proposal. After Tony offers his family's protection, John Grayson rejects said offer, which results in the Zuko brothers trashing the tent. During the scuffle, Dick Grayson calls the police and the call is intercepted by Batman. A fight then breaks out between Batman and Tony's brother, the Lion Tamer, where the Lion Tamer gets defeated by Batman and taken into custody. This upsets Tony greatly, so much so that Tony and his brothers would come back to the Graysons' tent on opening night, where Tony would tamper with the swings by removing the nuts from them, which would ultimately kill Dick Grayson's parents. This moment, along with what he says after they fall,
I think the Flying Graysons might have to change their name.
Really shows us just how evil, violent, and twisted this man truly is. He lacks reasoning, sympathy, empathy, and so much more. Even though Tony killed Dick Grayson's parents for his brother, it's hard to tell if he actually has any regard for them. He talks about family meaning everything to him, but seeing as he killed his own father, which, even if that was an accident, it likely warped his mind, causing him to have a sick perspective on things. Family only means everything during certain situations, and the Graysons rejecting their offer and their son getting the police involved made this situation fall right into that category. It only means everything when he wants and/or needs to place his violent behavior onto somebody. Any moment that causes Tony's sick mind to question itself is a moment that requires immediate violence from him. He's truly just a depraved and twisted shell of the man he once was. Later in the episode, Batman tracks Tony down, but Tony gets the upper hand. He then straps Batman to the Wheel of Death and begins explaining his past, which is where we learn that Tony killed his own father. He then attempts to kill Batman, but Dick Grayson, now in the guise of Robin, just without the name, saves Batman from the knife. Robin and Tony then begin fighting, where Tony gains the upper hand. When Tony is about to kill Robin, Batman breaks free and unleashes his anger onto Tony. Tony then climbs a ladder, and when Batman appears behind him, he falls off the tall structure, seemingly to his death. However, Robin would swing in and grab Tony before he hits the ground, ultimately saving the very man that killed his parents from the same fate that they died to. Tony is then taken into custody, and this would be the last time we would see him and his brothers within this show. Tony Zuko is an overly violent and greedy man who let his need for violence win at every turn in life. As I said earlier, it's unclear if Tony killed his father on purpose, but even if not, that action alone altered his mind greatly, creating the sick individual we see before us. That night when he missed was the same night that the need for violence was born within him, and it created a sick and evil desire. Another thing to note is that whenever Tony hands the popcorn bucket over to his brothers see the nuts for the swings in the bucket and they looked concerned. But Tony looks happy, which goes to show that he truly takes pleasure in doing what he does. As I said earlier, Tony and his brothers would never appear within the show again, nor would they appear within the comics. However, Tony's episode is actually one of the more important ones, as this episode doesn't just give us the birth of Robin, but it also gives us quick growth for his character. Instead of letting the man who killed his family die, Robin saves him, which shows us that Dick isn't as fueled by anger as Bruce is, as well as showing us that he's already on board with the no killing rule. The episode also shows us just how evil some of the more normal criminals within Gotham are. Tony Zuko is a great example of how violent Gotham can be even outside of your major villains. But moving off of his personality and psychology for a moment, one of the most amazing things about this episode is that Mark Hamill voices Tony Zuko and Kevin Conroy voices John Grayson. Rest in peace, you legend. You'll forever be missed, Kevin Conroy. Their inclusion in this episode was such a sweet and amazing touch. I absolutely love that they got an episode where they could work together and play different characters. It's just a nice thing to see in my opinion.
You think this is confusing? Try living inside my head.
The Joker, or just Joker, within the 2004 The Batman universe has more or less the same personality we've seen throughout other depictions, just with some minor differences. With two of the differences being, he's actually not abusive towards Harley, and instead, he appears to have feelings for her, which is something new for the Joker to exhibit. The second difference is, the Joker is more than a well-capable fighter. As always, Joker has a special bond with Batman and indirectly Bruce Wayne, which we see this bond be tested and shown to us throughout the whole series, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on the episode. However, the obsession that Joker has for Batman is still there. He's always seen Batman as the other side to his coin, and the show does a great job at showing that in some of its episodes. The Joker even says that they are two sides of the same coin in the episode The Bat and the Belfry. But going into his mind for a minute, the Joker suffers from countless disorders, resulting in the deranged man that we see before us that seems to lack all morals, or at the very least, has his own sick moral code. The Joker also seems to lack the concept of most emotions, such as fear, anxiety, sadness, and so on. Either that, or he's chosen to forget them as they don't benefit him. The only emotion he truly needs is happiness, and it's not even true happiness. It's just his default, as his mind is twisted beyond belief and now uses this quote default happiness to protect itself. Something else to note is that the Joker isn't even in full control of his own mind and actions. To reference Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight, the Joker is like a dog chasing cars. He wouldn't know what to do with one if he caught it. He just does things. Now, normally I would cover every episode the character I talk about appears in, and I would cover the comics as well. But considering the amount of episodes and comics the Joker appears in within this universe, we'd be here all day if I did that, so I won't be covering them all. Another reason why we won't be is because not every episode and comic issue elaborates on his personality. So instead, we'll just be focusing on a couple parts from a few of the episodes. And what a better place to start than the first episode of the series and his introduction episode, with that being The Bat and the Belfry. This episode shows us just how sinister the Joker really is, as well as showing us how quickly Joker became obsessive over Batman. In the episode, Joker's ultimate goal is to release his Joker toxin into Gotham, which would result in the mental collapse and/or death of the citizens. Joker encounters Batman at every turn of the way, but Joker looks at these encounters as more of a dance and a game, rather than an actual fight. However, that doesn't mean Joker can't fight. On the contrary, actually, this Joker is quite skilled, nimble, and quick on his feet, which not only surprises Batman, but Joker's wild fighting style allows Joker to keep up with Batman, and to catch him off guard occasionally. These encounters, as enjoyable as they are for Joker, are confusing and straining for Batman, making him question more than just who he is, but also just how someone can be this crazed. And those two questions would then spark Batman's own obsession with the Joker, which would then create the sick bonds between the both of them that we all know and love. Joker's introduction episode not only serves as our introduction into their bond, as it's their first encounter, but also our first look into how obsessive they both can be. The next episode we'll quickly cover is the rubber face of comedy. In this episode, Joker captures Ethan Bennett and begins torturing him. Detective Yin and Batman would then show up, and Batman throws a batarang at Joker, knocking the putty gun out of his hand before he can use it on Ethan. Afterwards, Ethan would accidentally breathe in some of the fumes from the Joker putty, which would then cause him to slowly transform into Clayface, which not only breaks Ethan's body, but also causes Ethan's mind to warp, resulting in Ethan losing grip on not only himself, but also reality. During this torture, Joker is laughing and making jokes the entire time, which just goes to show how inhumane he really is. He takes great pleasure in causing others pain, and he very much enjoys watching other people struggle with their sanity. There's multiple reasons for this, with some of them being he's just evil and violent, he's an agent of chaos, he's completely insane, and so on. But you could also argue that Joker likes to make others go insane because it makes him feel normal, like he's not alone. By him causing other people to go insane, he's creating this folie à deux, if you will. This episode really shows us just how far Joker is willing to go to create more madness within Gotham. And with that, it also shows us just how evil and serious of a threat the Joker really is. The next episode we'll talk about is The Laughing Bat, where the Joker's obsession is greatly shown as he dresses up as the Batman. The episode shows us just how similar the Joker thinks the two of them are, as well as how connected the Joker feels to Batman. Joker feels so connected to Batman that he literally dresses up as him and starts taking down criminals. He even attacks people who commit small infractions, which not only shows us how obsessed he is with the Batman, but also shows us that even though he's obsessed and feels this bond, he still truly doesn't understand the Batman. And it was that misunderstanding that would continue to drive this obsession. Joker started to feel a deep desire to understand the Batman and to have the Batman understand him. Not only does Joker want Batman to understand him and see him the way he sees himself, but he also wants Batman to see that he isn't so different from Joker. He wants Batman to see himself the way Joker sees him, which is the other side to his coin, and in a sense, the other half of Batman. Joker wants nothing more than for Batman to feel and acknowledge the connection that he himself feels. Joker wants this so much that he injects Batman with his Joker venom, which turns Batman into Joker, so to speak. This was the Joker's crazy attempt at getting the Batman to see through his eyes. It was also his attempt at getting Batman to feel that connection, as well as letting Batman in on how he lives, which would allow Batman to understand him better. This again shows us that Joker might feel alone in his madness, and alone in general. All Joker wants is a friend, someone who can relate to his issues and troubles. The final episode we'll talk about today is the episode Two of a Kind, where we're given our introduction to Harley Quinzel, aka Harley Quinn. This is the episode that I referenced at the beginning of the video whenever I said this Joker isn't abusive towards Harley and actually appears to have feelings for her. In the episode, Harleen gets fired from her show for ambushing Bruce Wayne, as well as for giving bad advice after Joker calls in. Joker, being in his words, her #1 fan, takes a quick interest in her, and she takes a quick interest in him. He ends up taking her back to one of his evil lairs, and the two begin bonding. Eventually, Joker would suggest a night out of town, but a change of clothes would need to be had, seeing as she was worried about what the masses would think if they saw her with him. So, Joker gives her a costume to put on, and Harley Quinn is born. When Joker sees her in her new persona, he whistles at her and pants like a dog, which not only goes back to him being attracted to her, but also goes back to Joker being very similar to a dog, with him being a little more primal. Another thing to note about this episode and other episodes where Joker obtains sidekicks is that it helps to provide the narrative for Joker that Batman and him are just two sides of the same coin. It helps to provide that connection, seen as it's another thing they have in common. Anything Joker can find to relate to Batman, he will find, and he will make it a similarity, even if it's in his own sick and twisted way. Overall, the episodes I listed and covered do a phenomenal job in so many aspects, such as exploring Joker's mind, creating a new relationship between Joker and Harley, showing the bond between Joker and Batman, and so many other things. Another thing that made this Joker so appealing, well, to me at least, was his design. And while I prefer his straitjacket design, his later design within the show is still great. Personally though, I think the straitjacket design might be my favorite design for the Joker in terms of cartoon TV shows. Something about it is just very appealing to me. But moving off of his design and onto his voice actor, Joker is voiced by another legend within the voice acting community, with that being Kevin Michael Richardson. And for those that didn't know, he voiced Captain Gantu in Lilo and Stitch, as well as Robert Hawken in Static Shock. Kevin Michael Richardson brought so many new things to the table with his portrayal of Joker, and all of them I absolutely love. He definitely cemented his legacy with this role, and in my opinion, he embodied the Joker perfectly. His performance is truly spectacular and isn't talked about enough, so shout out to Kevin Michael Richardson. He's truly a legend and one of the greats. But with all that said, this has been the Jeopardous joviality of the Joker. If you made it this far into the video, comment down your favorite episode from the Batman 2004 that has the Joker in it. I always love to hear y'all's opinions. I think mine would either be the episode The Bat and the Belfry or the episode The Rubber Face of Comedy. Also, real quick, big thank you to all of you for clicking on this video. I seriously can't thank y'all enough. Just know I really appreciate it and am forever grateful.
It's been a barrel of laughs, Batman. Oh, that's terrible.
Francis Gray started out as a struggling but loving family man who worked as a horologist. One day, after his boss leaves, Francis decides to steal a gold watch. However, the alarm goes off, which results in him running out the building and bumping into a police officer. Afterwards, he runs into a hot dog stand that then rolls into traffic, causing a pileup and an explosion. Francis would then be sentenced to 17 years in prison. Sometime after being sentenced, his wife would leave him and keep their son away from him, which would hurt Francis beyond comprehension. As a prisoner, Francis would work on all the clocks in the prison as well as all the watches for the guards. Eventually, his cell was covered in clocks, which would drive Francis to a point of insanity. This is where Francis would awaken his power to manipulate time after screaming at the clocks to stop. Francis succeeds with him being able to stop the clock for 1 second, and then again with him being able to rewind the clock for 1 second. This revelation would then give Francis hope in going back in time in order to fix his life. However, Francis was only able to go back 20 seconds at max, which would then cause some of his hope to fade. But with his hope fading, something else would have to fill that void, and that would be his anger. Francis genuinely believes he was unjustly sentenced to 17 years and now has a desire to get back at all of Gotham. Eventually, Francis would be released from prison, and upon being released, he would begin stealing chemicals to create an airborne toxin. This toxin would be released in Gotham on New Year's whenever the bell drops. After a few encounters with Batman, Francis finally obtains all the chemicals he needs and sets up his trap. This trap that Francis sets up shows us that he's completely blinded by his anger. He's no longer the same person. And with that, he has a completely different perspective on life. Batman attempts to break through to Francis by telling him that it's not too late to make the right choice.
It's not too late to make the right choice, Francis.
However, Francis still doesn't want to listen. That is, until his son shows up and the bell drops. Once the ball drops, hundreds of Gothamites, including Francis' son, were caught in the gas, resulting in their deaths. This broke Francis, so much so that when holding his dead son and screaming out in pain, he rewinded time all the way back to right before he stole the watch all those years ago, allowing him to make the right decision. And so, Francis did. He would stick with this job and maintain his family, as well as his family-oriented and loving personality. Francis Gray is one of the few people within this show and universe who actually goes on to redeem himself. Instead of attempting to perfect his crime, knowing he's able to, he decides to just go back to making an honest living, which shows us that Francis wasn't even truly a bad guy, but rather a desperate loving family man who just happens to be foolish at times. He's not insane, and he's not completely murderous. He was only becoming lost in the confusion that is madness. But now, let's move off the personality and life of Francis and on to the design and voice actor. The design of Francis Gray is rather simple but effective. Instead of being a monster or having an eccentric outfit, Francis just wears a casual suit. This helps paint the picture of Francis just being a regular guy even after all of this. He could have went on to wear a colorful outfit or a crazy suit of armor, but instead, he just wears what he would normally wear. And I know I said I'm done talking about his personality, but one more thing. What we can take away from that is, even while he's a criminal committing these crimes, he still just wants to go back to living a normal life. Okay, I'm done. Now, moving on to his voice actor, with that being Dave Foley, who helped in bringing so much more life and humanity into this character. And for those that didn't know, Dave Foley voiced Flick in A Bug's Life, as well as Terry in Monsters University. So shout out to Dave.
Yeah, I'm watching it. No problem.
Garfield Lens, aka Firefly, within the 2004 The Batman universe, is like most depictions of Firefly, with him being a pyromaniac as well as being a mercenary. However, this Firefly is not a burn victim, and he does not suffer from any major mental disorders, resulting in the less manic and more comedic Firefly that we see within the show. Instead of being driven by rage and the need to set Gotham ablaze like normal, he's driven by his desire for money and the pure fun of it all. Now, that doesn't mean he isn't serious at times, nor does it mean he's not a threat. The exact opposite of that actually. Firefly takes his job very seriously, and because of that, he can present a rather great threat for Batman. Two other things this depiction does differently is giving Firefly a love interest and evolving Firefly into someone/something new that also changes his perspective/personality, which we'll get into shortly. And speaking of that, let me quickly go over the episodes that I'll be talking about. So, similar to my Joker video, I won't be covering every episode that Firefly appears in, and instead, I'll just be covering 2 episodes, with them being The Big Heat and White Heat. The reason for this is because he's the main focus of these 2 episodes. Not only that, these episodes show the comedic/fun side, the serious side, as well as the pyromaniac side of Firefly. But enough of my rambling. Let's get into The Big Heat. In this episode, Firefly is working for GothCorp in order to take down rival companies. Once Batman tracks him down, we're quickly shown that Firefly likes to crack jokes, even in these serious situations. This lets us know that even though he's on a job, he'll still find a way to have fun while working it. But as I said earlier, when the situation calls for it, he'll drop the jokes and take things seriously, which we see in his later encounters with Batman. Something else to note is that Firefly is similar to Joker in the sense that they both hate when people ruin their fun. Not only are these jobs a source of good income for Firefly, but they're also his source of joy and fun. The saying that goes, find the job that you love and you will never have to work a day in your life, very much applies to Firefly. This mercenary job is not just a job for him, nor is it a hobby. It's his life. It provides all the joy, satisfaction, and adrenaline that he could ever ask for. Going back to the similarity between him and Joker, much like Joker needing to crack a joke, Firefly needs to work these jobs for the joy and adrenaline it brings. Now, onto the episode White Heat. This is the episode I referenced in the beginning whenever I was talking about him having a love interest and becoming someone/something new. In the episode, Firefly and his new partner and lover, Jane Blaisdell, both steal a phosphorus isotope to upgrade his battlesuit. However, when working on the isotope, an accident occurs which causes an explosion. This explosion would cause Firefly to become radioactive, and the radiation would also slowly cause him to go mad with not only power, but with rage. It would also cause him to mutate, and with his new form, he dons the name Phosphorus. This new form and self-perspective change would spark issues in the relationship between Firefly, now known as Phosphorus, and Jane. Their original goal was to get enough money to leave Gotham and all of this behind. But now, Firefly/Phosphorus seems to be losing sight of that goal due to his fixation on his new powers, which is something that Jane is not fond of, as it's not only not what she signed up for, but it also scares her. As more time went on in this new form, Firefly/Phosphorus would continue to grow more rageful due to him not being able to eat and not being able to do other mundane things like getting into a car and not having it explode in minutes due to the heat radiating off of him. Eventually, Firefly/Phosphorus and Jane would be apprehended and brought to Arkham. This is where Jane formally breaks up with him and is taken back to her own cell. As for Firefly/Phosphorus, last time I'm saying that, he would remain in his mutated form, which honestly kinda gives him a sad ending. Not saying that it wasn't deserved, but I just wanted to point that out. Now, moving on to his design. Firefly's design within this show is one of, if not the best, newer design for a character that this show offered. It's loved by many and even went on to appear in the LEGO Batman games. That's just how solid it was and still is to this day. And finally, let's talk about his voice actor, with that being Jason Marsden, who did an incredible job with this character. And for those that didn't know, he voiced Haku in the English dubbed version of Spirited Away, as well as Max Goof in both a Goofy movie and an extremely Goofy movie. So shout out to Jason.
Allow me to introduce myself. I am the Everywhere Man.
John Marlo, who is indirectly the Everywhere Man, is a friend of Bruce Wayne's and an art collector as well as a scientist who wished to help people and or the world with his technology. However, as we all know, in Gotham, that wish will come with a price to pay. Sometime while away at one of his labs, John created a unique prototype device that would allow John to clone himself. He would use this clone, who we'll call 1, as a partner to continue his future work, such as the work on the Quantex device, which is the machine that allows John to clone himself. Now, there's a few reasons for this, but I'll just name the more obvious two. The first reason is what I stated a second ago whenever I said he would use his clone as a partner to continue his future work. And the second reason is because John didn't have much of a social life. He's always been more of a recluse rather than a party goer. But as I said earlier, he is friends with Bruce Wayne, and Bruce paints John as a kind person. And that's what John is. Kind. Like I said, he wants to help others, provide technology and or resources that could help the masses. There's another point I'll bring up to circle back to this point, but for now, let's move on. John's clone would eventually stay around so long that he would form his own desires and free will. However, the clone's desires involved criminal activity, and every clone after him that would form its own free will and desires would have much darker desires and thoughts than the clone that came before. One would then imprison John, and he would go on to impersonate as the real John from there on out. One then returns to Gotham, with him hosting a party where he shows off his art. Eventually, one has a clone attempt to steal from him, so it paints him as innocent. Batman then shows up and chases the clone into a closet, where the clone has vanished, with it being called back to the Quantex device that one is in possession of. After this, some time passes, and one has his clone steal from the Gotham Museum of Art. This is where Batman and Robin realize that this art thief isn't just one thief, but actually multiple. But they've yet to see the situation for what it truly is. That is until Robin suggests that John may be behind this. Bruce then goes to see one, who Bruce believes to be the real John as of right now, at the same building where the first thief vanished in the closet. Through this meeting, Bruce finds out that something is off with John, who is actually one, and when Alfred sees the radiation inside of John, again, who is actually one, it confirms that something is indeed off. After the meeting, Batman and Robin would then head back to the building, and this is where Batman would see for himself that the thieves are clones of John. The clones then bring Batman to one, where they have another discussion. This time, Batman is using this meeting to gather information on where the real John Marlo is. Batman also lets one know that he knows one is just another clone. Meanwhile, Robin finds the real John Marlo and breaks him out of his cell. Now back with Batman, after he sees how each clone after becomes more corrupt than the last, and once he knows that John Marlo is in the building, he uses his smoke pellets to make a run for it. He's eventually caught at the atrium where Batman fights an army of clones. After a while, Robin shows up with the prototype device strapped to his chest with the real John Marlo by his side. Robin then clones himself and sends his clones into battle. However, the fight was short-lived as the prototype device wasn't built for uses such as this. At this point, Batman remembers that the clones have their own free will and uses this against one. Batman then tells the clones that one doesn't have a use for all of them and that he'll eventually just erase them all. This revelation turns some of the clones against one, and they begin charging after him in order to get the Quantex device. One deletes his army of clones, and Batman and Robin grapple up to him. One refuses to accept defeat, saying he'll just keep creating an army, but then John grabs the arm of one that has the Quantex device on it and deletes him. Remember when I said I'd circle back to the point of John being a good guy? Well, it's now. After John deletes one, he falls to his knees and says,
I thought I could help people everywhere, but all I am is nowhere man.
And after he resumes his life, he donates his entire collection to the Gotham Museum of Art. John also feels immense guilt for everything that's happened with the clones, taking full responsibility for the chaos. This shows us that John isn't and wasn't a bad person at all. Now, moving off of the personality and life of John Marlo and on to the design and voice actor. John's design is very simple, but like every other design within this show, it's fitting and effective. It shows us that he's not worried about looking the best all of the time, but that doesn't mean he won't dress for the occasion. Then you have the design of Everywhere Man, which, in all honesty, is not my favorite design within this series, but it still actually fits within the universe, especially when you start to think about some of the other designs, like Cluemaster's design, Gearhead's design, and even Francis Gray's design. They're all simple, yet very effective. Now, on to John's voice actor. The voice behind John Marlo is that of Brandon Routh, who really helped in driving home the humanity within this character. And for those that didn't know, Brandon Routh played Superman in the 2006 Superman Returns movie, as well as Ray Palmer, aka The Atom, in the Arrowverse. So huge shout out to Brandon Routh for playing two iconic characters within the DC universe.
Tens of thousands of lives could be lost.
And I'll shed a crocodile tear for each and every one.
Waylon Jones, aka Killer Croc, was a mercenary who worked hard. Eventually, as stated in the Batman Strikes issue 25, he volunteered on a DNA splicing experiment. This experiment didn't go as planned, and Waylon Jones was mutated into the humanoid crocodile that we all know. Killer Croc then escapes the facility out of fear of being placed in a cage and joins a circus with the hopes of being accepted. But the circus ends up placing him in a cage anyways. However, Croc would escape from the cage as well as the circus, and seeing as how everyone attempted to cage him due to them seeing him as a monster, he decided to turn to crime for survival. This depiction of Killer Croc is also more of the intellectual rather than just being a savage. We also see that this Killer Croc has a comedic side as we see him cracking jokes throughout the episodes. But that doesn't mean Killer Croc can't be serious, nor does it mean that others should take him lightly. So, similar to my Catwoman, Joker, and Firefly video, I won't be covering every episode. And instead, I'll just be covering 2 episodes, with the first episode being his introduction episode, Swamped, and the second episode being Team Penguin. With all that out the way, let's go ahead and get into his introduction episode. In the episode, Killer Croc comes to Gotham and recruits a team of robbers after showing them who's boss. He then sets his plan of flooding Gotham in order to rob stores and banks easily in motion. Killer Croc would actually go on to flood parts of Gotham, including some of downtown. Killer Croc seizes this moment to rob a bank for some gold, and after knocking Batman off of his jet ski, Killer Croc makes an escape. Remember when I said this depiction of Killer Croc is more intelligent? Well, this is what I mean. The way he plans his heist, with not only the flooding, but the team arrangement and the team leadership skills, shows us just how much more intelligent this Killer Croc is. Eventually, Croc tries to flood more of Gotham. However, Batman tracks him down and initiates a fight between the two while also trying to stop the water from pouring into Gotham. This fight shows us just how capable of a fighter Killer Croc really is. His time as a mercenary really shines through in this moment. Croc is not only able to land multiple hits on Batman, but also able to dodge and even at times predict his next move. However, as we all know, regardless of these feats, Batman would still emerge the victor. And with that, we move on to the episode Team Penguin. This will be rather quick, as he's not the main focus of the episode, but it does show more of his serious side, as well as potential fear. Also, I won't be covering all of the events within the episode, but if you are interested in hearing about that, I go into more detail about the episode itself in my Ragdoll and Killer Moth videos, so feel free to check those out. And now, back to Killer Croc and the episode Team Penguin. While at Penguin's villain meeting, Killer Croc threatens Killer Moth upon his entry, saying,
Listen, Mothball, there's only room for one killer here. That's Killer Croc.
Then later in the episode, whenever the group finds out what they're really after, they all get mad, Croc especially.
I knew it. This is about a stupid bird.
What we can take from this is that Killer Croc doesn't like being played or manipulated, even if it comes with a reward. The next segment we'll look at is the scene where Killer Moth demands the group to respect Penguin. After these demands, we see Killer Croc and the others reluctantly go back to being part of the group. Whether this decision was made out of fear or not is to be decided by y'all, so feel free to let me know what y'all think down below. And the final scene we'll be looking at is Killer Croc's final scene within the episode, in which he has a quick fight with Batman. During the brawl, Batman grapples to the other side of the pool, where Croc then says,
You think a little water's gonna stop me?
But ultimately gets frozen solid while emerging from the water due to, for lack of a better name, Batman's freeze grenade. It's actually more of a pellet, but you get the idea. Anyways, after being frozen solid, we wouldn't see Killer Croc within the episode again, which now moves us off of the personality and life of Killer Croc and onto his design and voice actor. Killer Croc's design, like the others, and I know I say this a lot, is simple yet effective. Unlike other designs, this Killer Croc doesn't wear pants and instead wears a vest. This vest could be something he wore when he was a mercenary, or at least something similar to it. Another cool detail about his design is the long scar on his left eye. This scar is something that probably came about during his time at the circus, likely during his imprisonment in the cage they had placed him in. Now, on to Killer Croc's voice actor, with that being Ron Perlman, who really helped in separating this depiction of Killer Croc from the rest. From the accent, the speech pattern, to just the voice itself, it was all done so well. And for those that didn't know, Ron Perlman played Hellboy in the live-action movies Hellboy 2004 and Hellboy: The Golden Army, as well as Hellboy in two of the animated movies, with them being Hellboy: Sword of Storms and Hellboy: Blood and Iron. Another role that Ron Perlman plays is Clay Morrow in Sons of Anarchy, which if any of y'all haven't seen, I highly recommend. It's a great show, and Ron Perlman plays a character that you just love to hate. So like always, huge shout out to Ron Perlman.
If I did not break all the Batman's bones, I guarantee you, I broke his spirit.
Bane, within the 2004 The Batman series, is a mercenary who volunteered for some physical enhancements in a secret lab located somewhere deep in the Amazon. Normally, I would continue to go on about Bane's backstory, but little is known about this depiction's origin, outside of what I already stated, unless there's something in the comics that I missed, and if there is, feel free to let me know what I missed down below. With that said, I may as well just talk about the episode I'll be covering, with that being Traction. The reason why I'll just be covering this one episode is because he's the entire focus of the episode. Whereas every other episode, he's only a cameo within a photo or only a cameo with a small part to play within the episode. So, with all that out the way, let's just get right into it. The episode starts off with two mob bosses talking about the Batman and how he's destroying both of their businesses. A third man then appears and tells them about Bane, as well as introducing them to Bane and offering up his assistance at a price. The two mobsters pay the third man and have Bane set out to destroy Batman. Bane then takes down a bank truck in order to draw the Batman out into a confrontation, which Bane succeeds in as Batman does interfere with the chaos that Bane is bringing forth. Batman realizes he's been baited, and Bane makes his presence known by initiating a conversation. Bane would go on to tell Batman that if Batman defeats Bane, he'll allow him to remove his mask, which, in the Lucha Libre wrestling circuit, is considered an insult as it could damage their career. This lets us know that Bane is operating under that same system with some minor tweaks to it. But back to their conversation, Batman refuses and says he doesn't fight for sport, and this would still start their fight as Bane would tell Batman to fight for his life then. The brawl goes on for some time, but Bane eventually comes out on top, leaving Batman unconscious and some fallen bricks from a building that he was thrown into. The guards from the bank truck tell Bane to take the money, but Bane tells them that it's pocket change, and with the Batman gone, all of Gotham is his. This lets us know that Bane has more goals beyond just being a simple mercenary. Now, we don't get to see those goals and dreams come true, but knowing that he wants to seize Gotham for himself does shed more light onto his character and personality. After Batman's defeat, some time passes and Batman builds a mech suit to battle Bane with, which he appropriately named the Batbot. Bane eventually breaks into a building and attempts to steal from the vault within it, but Batman and the Batbot mech shows up to Bane's surprise. A fight then breaks out, where after a while, Bane tackles Batman out of a window and they land on a roof. After getting up, Bane jumps in the air and breaks off one of the arms to the Batbot mech. Bane eventually gets flipped off of the Batbot and lands on a helicopter. Bane quickly picks up one of the rotor blades, and at first, he uses it as a lance or spear trying to impale the Batbot. Once that fails, he switches to using the blade as a sword, which allows him to cut through the Batbot. Much like Killer Croc and his mercenary skill set shining in moments, this moment highlights Bane's quick thinking and combat abilities. Something else to note is that even when he's on Venom, he's able to maintain those combat abilities and prior knowledge, instead of just becoming a raging brute. After Bane slices through the Batbot, he gets knocked down but manages to gain the upper hand, where he says,
You cannot beat Bane.
Afterwards, he breaks more of the mech and rips some of the metal out of it, rendering the Batbot more or less useless. Bane then tells Batman,
I left you with some dignity last time, but now I will unmask you.
Which again goes back to Bane using the luchador system, but twisting it to fit his crime-filled lifestyle. After Bane says that though, Batman grabs a live wire from the broken Batbot and places it onto Bane's Venom port, which causes him to be electrocuted and reverts Bane back to his normal state. Now, moving off of the personality and life of Bane, what little of it there is to discuss, we move on to his design and voice actor. Bane's design within this series is actually probably my favorite design for Bane overall, specifically the non-Venom Bane. The mask, the coat, and the gray/purple-ish skin all looks genuinely perfect and is truly unique. Then you have his Venom form, which, I'll admit, isn't anything too special, but it does perfectly match the theme of this Gotham. Now, on to Bane's voice actor, with that being Joaquim de Almeida, and I'm terribly sorry if I'm mispronouncing his name, which I most likely am, and again, I'm terribly sorry. Joaquim truly helped in creating this Bane into what he is. He perfectly embodies Bane and nails his performance. And for those that didn't know, he played Bucho in Desperado, Javier Ramos in Missing, and Colonel Felix Cortez in Clear and Present Danger. So huge shout out to Joaquim de Almeida. and again, I'm terribly sorry if I'm mispronouncing his name.
Face it, Harley. No one's ever gonna take you seriously as a psychologist.
Harleen Quinzel, aka Harley Quinn, within the 2004 The Batman series, works as a TV show host and has an online degree in psychology. This immediately differs from what we're used to seeing when it comes to her occupation prior to becoming a villain. Something else that differs from what we're used to seeing is the relationship between Harley and Joker, with it not being as abusive as it normally is. However, Joker still manipulates Harley, and with his manipulation, it shows us that this depiction of Harley still shares a similarity with other depictions, which we'll get into shortly. With that said, let me discuss the episode that I'll be covering today. With that being, Harley Quinn's introduction episode, Two of a Kind. I should also add that I won't be covering the entirety of Two of a Kind, as I've already discussed most of the episode itself in my Joker video. So with that in mind, I'll just be talking about the parts that focus more on the personality and psychology of Harley Quinn. And with my ramblings out the way, let's get right into this. We'll start at her TV show, where we get our first glimpse at how eccentric she is. During the show, we see just how animated she can be, and this is before she even dons the costume of Harley Quinn and starts falling for Joker. Harley would then be fired from her network for ambushing Bruce Wayne with a woman he had previously gone on a date with. Her boss would then tell her that she's not a psychologist and that all she is a joke. This statement would actually hurt Harley and send her into a spiral of doubt. That is, until her #1 fan shows up to her apartment, offering her a hand in these sad times. While at Joker's hideout, Harley tells Joker that she's interested in extreme personalities, and that his personality might be her ticket back onto the network. After discussing earnings from her potential tell-all book, the two have a heart-to-heart where Harley tells Joker that she was hurt by what her boss had told her and that she's worked hard to get to this point. This is where Joker suggests that they go do something out in the city, but Harley, being worried about what the public will think, is a little hesitant. Well, until she's given her new costume, that is. From here, the relationship between Harley and Joker would begin to blossom, with Joker loudly voicing his opinions on Harley and her new look. After some time passes, and a small musical number, we're shown the maniacal side of Harley as she wants revenge on the man who took her episode special, as well as revenge on the entire network. Harley and Joker eventually go to the network station and they set bombs all around the outside of the building/set. They then enter the building, where Harley drops a bookshelf on the man who took her episode special, and after talking about how she was wronged, she begins throwing bombs into the crowd. This shows us that the Harley from the beginning of the episode is not the same Harley that we see before us. While she may be just as eccentric and animated, she's going mad. She's begun to lose her way in the fog of madness that Joker has placed her in, and that very same madness is now seeping into her mind. After a while, the Bat family shows up, and that's when Harley and Joker start detonating the bombs on the exterior of the building. Harley then attempts to throw a bomb at Batman, but he reflects it and it lands back in her purse. The bomb then explodes and causes Harley to get knocked out. Joker sees Harley knocked out, and instead of helping her, he leaves her to be arrested, or worse, to die. However, as we all know, Batman would prevent her from dying to the explosions. Remember how I said this Harley shares a similarity with other depictions, and how I said we'd get into it shortly? Well, the time's now. After all is said and done, Harley gets arrested and is told by Batman that Joker doesn't care about anyone but himself, that he never has and never will, which Harley responds to with,
"You'd think a psychologist would know better."
However, once placed in the police cruiser, a message from Joker is left for Harley in the form of a whoopee cushion. And with that small message, Harley's passion and loyalty for Joker was reignited. So after being left to die, being used and thrown away like a toy that broke, and after acknowledging the fact herself that Joker doesn't care for others, she still goes back to him willingly. which ultimately gives us that similarity I was referring to. Most depictions of Harley Quinn have Stockholm Syndrome. However, the difference here is Joker isn't abusive. Joker is only manipulative within this series, which means this depiction of Harley is actually operating less on the thought of being controlled and possibly hurt, and more on the thought of actual love. Harley Quinn would go on to cameo in a few more episodes and have another prominent role in the episode The Metal Face of Comedy, but that episode focuses more on Joker and his digital copy, which is why we didn't discuss it here. Harley Quinn would also go on to appear within 6 of the comics. But now, let's move off of the life and personality of Harley Quinn and onto her design and voice actress. Harley's design is simple and doesn't differ too much from the animated series, which was honestly the best way they could have gone about it, in my opinion at least. However, one change is, instead of the suit just being red and black, the suit is now red and darker red with tints of black. So during certain lighting, it does look like the iconic red and black outfit, but outside of that lighting, we get to see the outfit's new colors, which is a lovely touch if you ask me. Then there's Harley's civilian wear, which is also simple but perfectly matches her occupation, her personality, and the theme of the show. But now, onto Harley's voice actress, with that being Hynden Walsh, who seriously killed her performance. Her work as Harley in Harley's introduction episode alone should have had the team behind the Batman using her in more episodes. And for those that didn't know, Hynden Walsh voiced Starfire in both Teen Titans and Teen Titans Go, as well as Harley Quinn in Batman Assaults on Arkham. So huge shout out to Hynden Walsh.
And have a one-on-one with the innocent voice within.
Professor Hugo Strange within the 2004 The Batman universe is like most depictions, with him being an insane psychiatrist. Only this version has more in mind than just beating and becoming the new Batman. I want to start this off by saying this video will be different from the rest, mostly in the sense that I won't be covering the episodes in as much detail, and instead, I'll just be specifically covering the important parts involving Hugo Strange. I also want to say that I won't be covering every episode that Hugo Strange appears in, simply because some of the episodes don't give us anything of note. So with that said, what a better time to discuss the episodes that I will be talking about, with them being A Fistful of Felt and Lost Heroes Part 1 and 2. And with that out the way, let's get right into A Fistful of Felt. We'll begin at the group therapy session, where Hugo Strange is shown to be intrigued by Arnold Wesker. After the session ends, Hugo puts Arnold in a unique program with the promise of being cured and saved from Scarface. Some time passes, and Hugo declares Arnold sane and discharges him from Arkham. Arnold then resumes his crime-free life, but one night, Hugo breaks into Arnold's apartment, pulls one of the eyes out of Mr. Snoots, then puts Mr. Snoots in the fridge and places Scarface in a chair. This shows us that Hugo's fascination with the human mind goes beyond just wanting to understand it. Hugo enjoys watching people's minds collapse, and he seriously enjoys being the cause of the collapse. After Arnold is apprehended, Batman sees Hugo outside the set, and Batman tells Hugo that he knows that he planted Scarface in Arnold's apartment. Hugo then tells Batman that he had to put his treatments to the test, which Batman doesn't agree with, and Batman tells Hugo that he doesn't agree with his methods, which Hugo fires back with,
Says the man who dresses like a bat.
This lets us know that Hugo truly feels zero empathy and sympathy for Arnold, and doesn't feel any remorse whatsoever for what he's done to Arnold. Hugo Strange is only but a hyper-obsessive, selfish sadist who truly believes he's above everyone else simply due to his intelligence. With that said, that about covers A Fistful of Felt. So now, on to Lost Heroes Part 1. Hugo makes a deal with the Joining and joins forces with the Space Being. Hugo then begins abducting the Justice League to keep up his part of the deal. This team-up really shows us how evil Hugo truly is, as he's willing to watch the world and everyone in it be killed just for the sake of obtaining his ever-long desire of having the knowledge of the universe. It lets us know that Hugo has zero regard for others and only wishes to preserve and advance his own existence. So much so that he's willing to work with a genocidal space being just to seek out that preservation and advancement. And this is where we'll end our discussion on part 1 of Lost Heroes, and we'll move on to our discussion about part 2. We'll begin in Hugo's HQ, where Hugo tells the Joining that he's fulfilled his part and he wants his reward. The Joining then gives Hugo the knowledge of the universe, which, to Hugo's surprise, leaves him in a catatonic state. After being left in this state, the Justice League, specifically Martian Manhunter, uses Hugo's knowledge to defeat the Joining. Hugo was then taken back to Arkham, where he would live out the rest of his days as Arkham's most peaceful patient. The story of Hugo is one of greed, obsession, and power, and it was those three driving factors that led Hugo down a path of insanity and failure. But now, moving off of the personality and life of Hugo Strange, and onto the design and voice actors. I say this every time, but Hugo's design is simple yet effective, and like the Joker, his design changes. Hugo starts off wearing a white suit with a tie, but then later in the series, his design changes to fit more of the mad scientist aesthetic, as it's an actual lab coat. And you can take the early design of Hugo as the version of Hugo that hasn't gone completely mad, and the later design of Hugo as the version that has gone completely mad. But now, we'll move on to Hugo's voice actors, with them being Frank Gorshin, who voiced the early Hugo Strange, and who sadly passed away, and Richard Green, who voiced the later Hugo Strange. And for those that didn't know, Frank Gorshin played the Riddler in the 1966 Batman series and movie, as well as Dr. Owen Fletcher in 12 Monkeys, and many more great roles. Rest in peace, you absolute legend. May you rest easy. And as for Richard Green, he voiced Ben Mummy / Snarrow in Ben 10, the Wasp leader in The Ant Bully, the Toy Man in the Batman 2004, and many more great roles. So shout out to Richard Green.
That's what separates the Waynes from the Cobblepots.
Oswald Cobblepot, aka the Penguin within the 2004 The Batman universe, is a selfish, greedy, arrogant, and rude man who holds hatred for Bruce Wayne simply because Bruce is a reminder of everything that he is not. Oswald is descended from an aristocratic family whose lineage goes back to Newcastle, England. Alfred Pennyworth's grandfather was once a butler to the English Cobblepots, and Alfred was raised on stories on how cruel and disrespectful the Cobblepots were to their staff. A couple years prior to the show, Oswald would leave Gotham City and spend time traveling the Orient. There, he met two silent assassins known only as the Kabuki twins, who later went on to work for him as his personal bodyguards. This depiction of Penguin is also highly experienced in martial arts, which allows him to keep up with Batman in hand-to-hand combat. This was something else that he picked up in the Orient. With that brief summary out the way, let me go ahead and quickly discuss the episodes that I'll be covering, with them being Call of the Cobblepot, Bird of Prey, and The Cat, the Bat, and the Very Ugly. The reason why I won't be covering every episode Penguin appears in is simply due to the amount of episodes that he's in. However, if y'all want me to explore some of the episodes that I didn't cover, I'll gladly make a part 2. And while on this topic, if y'all want a part 2 to Joker's video, let me know down below. With all that said, let's get right into Call of the Cobblepot. Oswald eventually returned to the United States, where he used his birds to nab various riches from Gotham's wealthiest citizens. Oswald would store his ill-gotten gains in the aviary at Cobblepot Manor. Following his return to Gotham, Oswald crashed a charity drive hosted by Bruce Wayne at Wayne Manor. So off the bat, there's two things we can take from this, starting with Oswald's obsession with money. Oswald doesn't just view the money as money, he views it as a means to status and also a means to power. The second thing to take from this is the act of the party crashing alone, as Oswald uses this as an opportunity to get at Bruce Wayne. After causing a scene, Oswald manages to snatch the party's guest list and uses this information to select his future targets. Bruce assumed that Oswald's return to Gotham coincided with the recent burglaries and thefts, so he investigated the crimes in his costumed alter ego, the Batman. However, around this time, Alfred, whose family has bad blood with the Cobblepots, takes matters into his own hands and tracks Oswald down to the old Cobblepot manor, but was soon captured by the Kabuki twins. Batman arrived at the manor shortly thereafter, where he and Oswald would fight for the first time. Now calling himself the Penguin, he demonstrates his fighting skills against the Batman, and the two engage in a protracted battle across the room. But as we all know, Batman would eventually emerge victorious, and Penguin was captured. This episode not only shows us how hung up on money Oswald is, but it also gives us the birth of Penguin, as prior to near the end of the episode, he was only going by Oswald, as well as showing us the hatred that he holds for Bruce and how he truly believes that himself and his family are better than the Waynes and other families. It also shows us how strategic and combat capable the Penguin is, which serves to help out a lot in the episode Team Penguin. And as I said in the beginning of this video, if y'all want a part 2 to this video where I talk about Team Penguin through the eyes of Penguin, let me know down below. With that said, let's move on to the episode Bird of Prey. The episode begins during the end of one of Penguin's heists, where Batman intervenes and prevents Penguin from stealing the money. However, before Batman can restrain Penguin, one of the Kabuki twins kick Batman from behind so Penguin can make his escape to the van. After this, Penguin sees Bruce on TV, and the hatred that Penguin has for Bruce is shown yet again here. This whole episode really serves as our look into that hatred that Penguin has for both Bruce Wayne and Batman. But this episode also shows us how similar Penguin is to both of them, with just two examples being, both Bruce and Oswald both come from families of wealth, and both of their personas, Batman and Penguin, both use gadgets to aid in their adventures. The only real difference there is, Penguin's gadget is more of a all-in-one type of gadget. So, skipping ahead here, Bruce is on a TV show that's trying to explore his life, and Penguin breaks into Wayne Manor and holds Alfred hostage. This is yet again where we get another look into Penguin's hatred for Bruce, as he steals valuables and destroys the manor, all while rambling on about how he deserves everything that Bruce Wayne owns simply because he is a Cobblepot. Eventually, the reporter that was filming the show on Bruce Wayne goes to Wayne Manor, where Batman and Penguin are now fighting, and this presents an opportunity for Penguin, an opportunity to steal the spotlight from Bruce Wayne. After incapacitating Batman, Penguin tells the reporter that he'll give her something better than anything Bruce Wayne could ever give, and says he'll unmask the Batman, which he almost does, but Alfred hits Penguin with a chair before he can take the cowl off of Batman, which allows Batman to get back into the fight. After said fight, Batman comes out victorious, like always, and Penguin is taken back to Arkham. But before the episode ends, the reporter tells Bruce that she's going to be doing her special on Penguin now, which goes back to what I was saying about an opportunity to steal from Bruce. It wasn't much, but he did manage to temporarily steal the spotlight from Bruce Wayne. And now, we'll move on to the Cat, the Bat, and the Very Ugly, which I'll be briefly covering. Upon escaping Arkham, Penguin teams up with Catwoman in an effort to steal two powerful ancient Egyptian statues that give the holder the ability to expel and use the power of light. What we can take from this is, Penguin is now after more than just money, which he previously saw as a means to power. He now has his focus on real power. But going back to the episode, After Penguin double-crossed Catwoman, Penguin stole both statues, handcuffed Batman and Catwoman together, and fled. He then attempted to destroy Gotham, but Penguin was unsuccessful and his plans were stopped as the team-up between Batman and Catwoman was too much for both him and the Kabuki twins to handle. Batman then handcuffs Catwoman and Penguin together and takes both statues. Penguin and Catwoman would then hop onto Penguin's umbrella and they would make their escape together. With this episode, we see the desires of Penguin alter and begin switching focus onto things that bring in more than just money. And if you ask me, this episode does a great job at showing us how far Penguin is willing to go with his crimes. But now, moving off of the personality and life of Penguin and onto his design and voice actor. As far as animation goes, this design is actually one of my favorites, as it fits the character brilliantly and the overall artwork of the show makes it that much better. From the suit to the hair to the nose and hands, it's all done perfectly. And now, onto the voice actor, with that being Tom Kenny, who seriously outdid himself with this role. When I think of Penguin's voice, it's Tom Kenny's voice that I hear in my head. That's how good of a job he did with this role. And for those that didn't know, Tom Kenny voiced Penguin in the Batman Ninja movie, as well as Plastic Man, Babyface, Amazing Man, Deadshot, Mirror Master, and the Ray in Batman Brave and the Bold, as well as many more great roles outside of the DC universe. So huge shout out to Tom Kenny.
Ready, Red? Let's do it, Red.
Pamela Isley, aka Poison Ivy, is a charming, clever, and quick-tempered schemer known to go to extreme measures to get her environmental messages heard. After a tragic accident that transforms her into the half-human, half-plant being that is Poison Ivy, she is able to control anyone that gets a whiff of her plant pheromone spores. And with that brief summary out the way, let me go ahead and talk about the episodes that I'll be discussing. With them being Batgirl Begins Part 1 and 2, and the episode Fleur du Mal, and I'm terribly sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. I should also add that I won't be going too in-depth into the episodes as I'm just trying to focus on Poison Ivy. And with that said, let's get right into Part 1 of Batgirl Begins. The episode begins sometime in the near future with Batman fighting Poison Ivy. During said fight, we hear Ivy make a couple puns, which lets us know that she has a comedic personality, as well as letting us know that she potentially sees these encounters, and her crimes in general, as fun. After Batgirl shows up, she begins the narration, which takes us into the past to show us how Pamela Isley became Poison Ivy, and this is where we're also shown the friendship between Pamela and Barbara. This friendship is one that Jim Gordon disapproves of, and we come to find out it's because Pamela has a juvenile record and he's worried that she'll lead Barbara down a similar path. And he was right to worry, because Pamela was taking Barbara on a job where they both break into the Chlorogene building and confront the CEO to wage a campaign of eco-terrorism. After they escape, Jim catches Pamela and Barbara on the streets and gives them both a ride, and this is where we find out that Pamela has a juvenile record. Also, within this scene, Pamela gets a tone with Jim when exiting the car. This lets us know that even before becoming Poison Ivy, Pamela has always had these negative feelings towards Jim, and because of these negative feelings, those same negative feelings would tend to bleed off into her friendship with Barbara, which we'll get into shortly. Once Pamela goes home, this is where we find out that she's behind the recent chemical plant attack as she begins talking with Timblor and instructing him to destroy the Chlorogene building. During this conversation with Timblor, we're shown levels of confidence and pleasure in barking orders, as well as potential pleasure from the pure destruction of it all as she laughs all evil-like after telling Timblor her plans. After Timblor's failed attempt at destroying the Chlorogene building, and Pamela's failed attempt at breaking into the building, Pamela contacts Timblor again and tells him he better get down there to finish the job, and while doing so, she reveals that she is currently at the Chlorogene building. Barbara then shows up and confronts Pamela, and this is where we see those negative feelings for Jim bleeding through their friendship as Pamela says,
"Should've known I couldn't trust the commission's kid."
Temblor then shows up and confronts both Pamela and Barbara, and while Barbara does her best to try and reason with Temblor, Pamela runs away, leaving Barbara to deal with him and says, "You two have fun." This not only goes back to the negative feelings, but it also shows us that Pamela is much more of a save yourself before anyone else type of person, even when it comes to a friend. So, Pamela runs into the Chlorogene building, where Temblor soon follows along with Batman and Barbara. After Temblor incapacitates Pamela, a fight then breaks out between Batman and Temblor. Barbara sees Pamela and vice versa, which then causes Pamela to plead to Barbara for help in getting the debris off of her so she can get up before the vat of plant mutagens falls on her. And Barbara, being the good person she is, rushes to Pamela but gets knocked into a wall. The vat of plant mutagens then falls on Pamela, which causes Batman to throw a batarang in order to hit a switch that elevates Pamela out of the chemicals. Once she's placed inside of an ambulance, we're shown Pamela being reborn as Poison Ivy, which closes out the episode. This episode not only gives us the birth of Poison Ivy, but it also shows us the early signs of her hatred towards Jim Gordon, which we'll see more of later on, as well as showing us how little regard she has for friends and people in general. Now, moving on to part 2 of Batgirl Begins. En route to the hospital, Pamela revives and a giant plant knocks over the ambulance, taking out the guards and pulls Pamela out of the vehicle. It then takes her to a greenhouse and embraces her in a healing plant cocoon. Pamela awakens, only to see for herself that she is now part plant and fully healed, as well as now being able to cause plants to grow and obey her mental commands. Meanwhile, Barbara is considering her future career as a crime fighter when the plant in her room comes to life and Ivy makes her presence known. Pamela toys with Barbara, then announces she plans to launch a new wave of eco-terrorism and is taking the name Poison Ivy. Ivy offers Barbara to join her before making her exit. With this rebirth, Ivy's priorities and mentality have become altered, resulting in her becoming more power-driven. However, she still remains with a comedic personality, as we see in this encounter. So, skipping ahead here, Poison Ivy goes on a rampage astride a giant plant, confronting Commissioner Gordon and taking him prisoner. She then takes off back to the greenhouse where she dangles the Commissioner over an acid vat. And this is where we started at the beginning of Batgirl Begins Part 1. Not much noteworthy here, so, after a long fight, Batman and Batgirl come out victorious as they freeze Ivy solid. This episode not only shows us how quickly Ivy became obsessive over her new powers and power in general, but it also shows us those negative feelings that she has for Jim being brought to light as she tries to execute him. And now, on to the final episode that I'll be discussing, with that being Fleur du Mal, which I'll be briefly summarizing just for the sake of not having this video be overly long by explaining minor things. Anyways, when her father, along with other high-ranking Gotham officials, begin to embrace environmental causes after the delivery of a mysterious plant, Barbara discovers that they've been replaced with plant-based copies created by Ivy, and teams up with Batman to stop Ivy, beat their evil clones, and free the rest of the Gotham officials. And together, they accomplish all 3 of those tasks. What this episode ultimately elaborates on is Ivy's lack of care for the humans that occupy Gotham, as well as her desire for taking it over with her newfound powers and making it her own personal Garden of Eden. There's also a scene where Plant Jim says that he has a flower for Barbara that was picked specifically for her, which implies that Ivy no longer has the same level of care for Barbara that she once did a few episodes ago, whenever she first went on a rampage in her new persona and offered Barbara a chance to join her. But now, instead of offering a choice, Ivy attempts to force the choice onto Barbara. And it's from this act alone that we can see that the Ivy we once knew is no longer the same person. But now, moving off of the life and personality of Poison Ivy and on to her designs and voice actress. Ivy's design as Pamela, like the rest, is simple but matches the character perfectly. From the rips on the pants at the bottom to the sewn-in patch on the sleeve, it all matches Pamela's personality and the character overall. Then you have the design for Ivy, which is like most designs, but with a few differences, like one of them being her hair. Instead of long flowing hair, it's placed up high and is curly. And again, I truly believe this design matches the character brilliantly. But now, moving on to Poison Ivy's voice actress, with that being Piera Coppola, who did an amazing job bringing this Poison Ivy to life. And for those that didn't know, Piera voiced Sylvanas Windrunner in both World of Warcraft Reign of Chaos and World of Warcraft The Frozen Throne, as well as in Heroes of the Storm. So huge shout out to Piera Coppola.
Why bother? I don't even remember them.
They'd be proud of you. They'd be proud of us both for taking on the Batman.
William and Andy Mallory's parents had been jewel thieves who were sent to jail around the same time that Bruce Wayne's parents were murdered. Since then, William and his younger brother Andy had become friends with Bruce Wayne and his ward, Dick Grayson, with whom Andy had a rivalry with. However, much like Bruce and Dick, William and Andy were hiding a secret, and that secret was their secret identities as Wrath and Scorn. The reason for these identities is to be an evil analog to the Bat Team to aid Gotham's villain community. You may ask yourself, why would they aid the villains? And that's because of Batman targeting criminals like their parents who were, quote, just trying to earn a living. With that brief summary out the way, let's dive more into the episode. But before doing so, I want to go ahead and say, like always, I'll be focusing more on the characters of Wrath and Scorn rather than the episode itself. So, with that said,
let's get on with it.
We'll start at the rock climbing excursion that Bruce, William, Dick, and Andy are on. During this excursion, we're shown the rivalry between Andy and Dick, and we're also shown how similar Bruce and William are. And much like Bruce, William is exceptionally good at hiding his alter ego from not only his friend, with that being Bruce, just like how Bruce hid his alter ego from Ethan, but William is also good at hiding it from the world, just like Bruce is. And continuing with the similarities, William wants to fight for the criminals in the name of his parents, much like how Bruce wants to fight for the innocents in the name of his parents. As for Andy, he's shown to be more arrogant than Dick, and is more so attached to the idea of having fun and the crimes in general, rather than fighting in the name of his parents, whom he later says he doesn't even remember. The takeaway from this is, Andy doesn't have the same motivations as Dick, Bruce, or even William. And with Andy not being worried about doing things in the name of his parents, it shows us that the level of emotions that he holds for them is much lower than what the other characters hold for theirs, including his own brother. But now, moving on from the excursion and onto the first real encounter between our hero fighters, Batman and Robin, and our villain fighters, Wrath and Scorn. This fight shows us how even in combat, William and Andy, who I'll now just call Wrath and Scorn, mirrors Batman and Robin. And this mirror image goes on to be shown throughout the entire episode. After the fight, Wrath and Scorn make their escape, and we jump to a phone call between Bruce and Wrath. The conversation between the two continues the mirror image trope that we've been seeing. So much so that even Bruce comments on how similar their schedules are. It's also during this segment where we hear Scorn say that he doesn't remember his parents. This is also the same segment that shows us that Scorn is more worried about receiving money rather than fighting in the name of his parents like Wrath. The final thing to touch on in this segment is the fact that even Wrath begins to feel like Batman and him are in sync and move like mirror reflections. Moving on from this scene though, Wrath confronts some of the villains of Gotham and offers them his protection while telling them about a job that could make them all rich. This job that was relayed to the villains would go on to fail, as not only does the GCPD arrive, but so does Batman and Robin. During this job, a fight breaks out where both Batman and Wrath figure out each other's identities. After said fight, Wrath and Scorn make their escape. Moving on from said escape, while Team Bat is in the Batcave doing some research, Wrath and Scorn break into the Batcave by using Alfred to gain access, and this is where the final battle begins. During this battle, Wrath says he should have known Bruce was Batman simply because of how civic-minded he is. After Wrath starts blowing up parts of the Batcave, Batman decides to call in the Bats of the Cave to assist in the fight. As for Scorn and Robin, Scorn starts to get the best of Robin, but at the last minute, Robin hits a switch on a training robot that knocks Scorn out. After this battle, Wrath and Scorn would be arrested and placed into a transfer van. The only problem is, Joker has returned in a disguise and uses his Joker gas on Wrath and Scorn, causing them to go completely mad. And that would be the last time we would see Wrath and Scorn. William Mallory and Andy Mallory, aka Wrath and Scorn, in my opinion, brought an interesting story and episode in general to the table. They served as mirror reflections to our heroes, and what an amazing job they did. Also, because I forgot to mention the title of the episode itself during the beginning, the title of the episode that we just discussed is The End of the Batman. And now, we'll be moving on to their designs and voice actors. The designs of William Mallory and Andy Mallory, like every other design, are simple and effective. William is much more put together and dresses with class similar to that of Bruce Wayne, whereas Andy, he dresses like a punk, symbolizing the little regard he has. As for the designs for Wrath and Scorn, Wrath has a design that seems to be a mix of Batman and Night Owl from Watchmen, or possibly Batman and Owlman, but specifically the Batman Brave and the Bold design. And as for Scorn, his design obviously resembles Robin's, but instead of a mask that just covers the eyes, Scorn wears a mask similar to that of Nightwing from the Arkham series. Now, moving on to their voice actors, with Raph's being Christopher Gorham, and for those that didn't know, he played Christopher Grubstick in Ugly Betty, Green Arrow in Batman: The Doom That Came to Gotham, Brad in Modern Family, and many other great roles. And as for Scorn's voice actor, he was voiced by Daryl Sabara, who truly needs no introduction, but for those that didn't know, he played Junie Cortez in all the Spy Kids movies, Tim Scottson in the show Weeds, as well as Rex Salazar in Generator Rex, and many other great roles. So huge shout out to Christopher Gorham and Daryl Sabara. And that about wraps up this video. If you made it this far, I just want to go ahead and thank all of you for watching. It seriously means the world to me. I also want to go ahead and thank Mercenary X84 for still being a member and supporting me along this journey. I really appreciate all of the support and patience not only Mercenary, but all of you have been giving me. I truly can't thank y'all enough, but just know I am forever grateful. With that said, and my ramblings out the way, it's been ugly, and I'll see y'all in the next one.